Welcome back to Double Fries No Slaw. TJ Pittenger, Richie Barnes here. Going to talk a little bit of recruiting, some highs and lows. Unfortunately, over the last few years, Richie, it's been a lot more lows. Just quickly before we get started, I will tell you this. I don't know if you've seen that some of the Nike stuff is starting to drop over at Garnet and Gold. So I appreciate them as always, but like, there's a lot of stuff in my cart right now that Kara's like, all right, you got to whittle that. You can't spend that much, but garnetandgold.com. Appreciate them as always. No Slaw will save you 15% on your order. Listen, we may have a lot of things to complain about as FSU fans, but the gear is not one of those things. Make sure you're getting it at Garnet and Gold. Again, all that Nike stuff starting to creep in as they start to get shipments. So exciting times there. Richie, we don't go so deep into recruiting, right? Like on everything. Sometimes we get a big recruitment, big commit or something. We'll talk about that, a big decommit, whatever. There was some buzz. There was some hype around a 5-star quarterback, Keyshawn Henderson, a Houston commit, a kid from that area, officially visiting Florida State. That was supposed to happen this weekend. And ironically enough, while I was at Disney this week, get the news that he's canceling his OV. He's not showing. No, it was the day before. So I wasn't at the happiest place on earth. I was unhappy twice. Cancels his OV, shuts down his recruitment, says he'll sign with Houston. Now, you never know with kids, right? Like we had a million people shut down their recruitments last year, namely our quarterback commit. But Florida State not able to get him on campus, and the gut punch after gut punch that is FSU recruiting really over the last 5 years continues. Now, the kid wasn't committed to us. He wasn't even uncommitted, right? Like you were trying to flip him from the hometown team. How big of a deal is this?
It's a big deal, not that you didn't get a commitment from him, but I think it's a big deal that he didn't even take the time to take an official visit, a free trip to Tallahassee, right? Quarterbacks typically shut things down this time of year. You won't see many high-profile quarterbacks left on the board, come August, September, November, especially not around signing day. It's very rare. You get one or two, but it's not often. He's committed to Houston, like you said. He's from Spring, Texas, which I'm assuming is nearby Houston. So that makes a little sense. But even if he came on an OV, here's my concerns. The other colleges after him, Texas A&M, Alabama, like in Arizona State. And I think we have a very good NIL in what we do. However, you're not going to compete with Texas A&M for money, and that's much closer to him and his family. I just think all the cards were stacked against you. But the fact that, he announced he was going to take an OV and then just said, you know what, I don't need that free trip to Tallahassee. That's very concerning to me.
Yeah, I mean, now ultimately at the end of the day, complete impact, right? I think you were probably still unlikely to sign him. I think that's
Correct.
fair. I think we can all agree on that. However, to just not, so at the end of the day, there was maybe a 20% chance that he'd end up in your class if he came to the visit, 25, whatever random number you want to assign there. You might be lower, you might be higher, you might say 50, whatever that random percentage was that he ends up in your class, you had that as a possibility. But then it goes to 0 when he doesn't show up, right? like or like 1 or 2, like crazier things have happened in recruiting for sure. But so the impact may be about the same. You may not have landed him even if he did show up. But from an optics standpoint, it just is evidently apparent that this staff cannot get guys. For a while, it was they couldn't get them to commit or couldn't get them to stick or sign, right? Like that's what's most important. But like you said, to not even be able to get him on the visit, to have it literally pulled the day before. I think it was on Thursday that it happened. And then on Fridays when his visit was supposed to start. I mean, by that point, not that these guys care about a $300 flight or whatever it ends up being, but like at that point, like travel's already booked. Hotels are already reserved, right? You've already allocated staff resources to make this happen. And, let's be very frank I know the House settlement just came down this week. I mean, let's be very frank. You were probably paying him to come on the visit. It wasn't just a free trip. Let's be very fair on how 5-star quarterback trips work. They get paid to go, Like, it's not just come for a free trip. It's we'll give you money to show up. Now, I haven't specifically asked anyone at Florida State or anyone associated with Florida State, were you paying the kid to come? I'm just telling you in general, that's how 5-star visits happen. They get paid to go on them now. So it wasn't even just like, hey, we'll give you a free vacation to Tallahassee and you can come get some Guthries. It was, hey, we'll pay you money to show up here this weekend, right? And yeah, that's frustrating. Blame. I saw a bunch of different people getting blamed. And I think that's interesting, right? Like, this person wants to blame tow cars and this person wants to blame NIL and this person wants to blame this, that. Man, this is a Mike Norvell problem. And I like Mike Norvell. I think he's a good person. I think he works incredibly hard. And again, all things aside, like I'm very appreciative of the things that he's done well here. But man, the buck stops there. You want to blame the GM, or you want to blame the QB coach, or you want to blame Ingram, or you want to blame Michael Alford. I don't know. Man, the blame goes everywhere, right? And so many times people like to blame. This is Mike Norvell's program. And for an offensive coach, for a quarterback, kind of developer, this is him. Right. And I don't, does he end up in the class one way or the other? I don't know, man. But to not even get a guy to campus, I don't think Mike did anything necessarily wrong. I don't think he texted the kid a weird emoji and he didn't show up or something. I just think that the juice, the little bit of recruiting juice that he once had, I just feel like that's gone, right? 2-10 sucked the rest of the life out of whatever limited amount of juice that he had and this program had, which was never great under him. But whatever juice that they had or he had, that just feels like it's all the way gone.
Yeah, and I guess my biggest concern is that other elite players, they talk to other elite recruits, right? They're at camps all the time. They see these things happening. They see, a Keyshawn Henderson, a 5-star, number 3 overall player in the country, according to the 247 composite, that he set up an official visit to Florida State and then said, no, I'm not even going to take that. I'm going to stay committed to Houston. Florida State and Houston are in 2 different stratospheres when it comes to the legacy of the programs. And it's just a real black eye, in my opinion. And I think, not to overstate things, but this goes beyond just Keyshawn Henderson, because other elite players, whether it be a wide receiver or an offensive lineman, they're going to see that and say, oh, man, he didn't even feel the need to take the visit for whatever reason. I think that's a problem. And I think it's a problem that's been building up slowly since Mike Norvell has been here. The Travis Hunter thing is one thing, but then, he's lost his top ranked recruit on signing day multiple years, and now you can't even get a top ranked recruit to visit you. That's a problem.
Yeah, I want to say like everybody gets one Travis Hunter, which you really don't, right? Yeah. Like that's only happened to us. But like if it was just Travis Hunter, I think you could say, okay, you learn from that. It's the most embarrassing thing that I think has ever happened. Maybe outside of going 2-10, so I guess he owns both those things. But, fine. Travis Hunter happened. The wool was pulled over your eyes. Dion got you one time. Okay. The very next year, Keldrick Falk happens. The very next year, you have other ones happen, right? Then KJ happens. Armando Blunt happens. Like, it's just year after year. This year, you were able to hold on to win, but you lose a defensive end. It's just every year it is something, and it just happens year after year. Again, your quarterback last year, right, flipped after shutting things down, right, and locking in, which maybe that's good news for this. Maybe you can get this kid to do the same thing. I'm sure they will continue to try to go after him, and you just hope that Houston loses every one of their games, and you have a chance to flip him late. But not a great spot to be in. It also shows what happens when you get to June and you don't have a quarterback committed. Right. You talked about this. Quarterbacks shut things down a lot earlier. And, a 5-star is a great, plan C, plan D, right? They've missed on a couple of guys. They've had a couple of targets go elsewhere. They had their guy flip to another program when they had Brady committed at one point. And so I do think that, this was a good option, C or D for sure. Like, shoot, if you'd have missed on your top 3 targets and then ended up with a 5-star, that'd be awesome. But it also it's just a side effect of the entire issue, right? Like the problem is not necessarily that you can get a 5-star to commit or flip from his hometown team. The problem is that you don't have a quarterback committed right now, right? You didn't have a guy that you were confident with that you were just trying to upgrade on, that you were just trying to get better than. This isn't a Chris Parsons situation. This is a, hey man, we got nobody and we're desperate, and so we're taking hacks at 5 stars that are committed elsewhere. And yeah, it would have been great if they could have got him on campus and then, potentially even got him to decommit or flip or anything like that. But yeah, it's a microcosm. The issue with this is a microcosm of the entire issue, and it's just the struggles that they've continued to have. Some options going forward: Landon Duckworth, Jaden O'Neal, Jaron Hughley. Kind of an athlete. You're on to like option 6 or 7 at this point at the quarterback position. There's an option where they don't even take a quarterback, right? Like they go portal again next year, and the quarterback here, Jordan Travis covered up a lot of things, right? Not only for the team, but for QB recruiting. QB recruiting has not been spectacular. They got Luke. Yeah, that was a big win. He's now the 3rd stringer over at Mississippi State, the worst team in the SEC. You got Brock. He's in year 3 of the system. Still had to go to the portal to replace him. You had to go out and some of your other pickups, Tate and whoever. Like none of the guys that they've recruited are off just like blowing things out of the water. Altmaier's doing okay, I guess, at Illinois, but he was never going to stay here with who else you had on the roster. So, yeah, a quarterback just in general, not a great situation. You have some options that you can try and flip some guys or pull some guys in at the midnight hour, but man, their options are running slim, and they'll end up with a quarterback in this class, whether it's Mike or another coach that ends up being here on signing day. I don't know. I think they'll end up with a quarterback. Again, you're at option 6, 7 at this point, and at this, you're going to end up with a quarterback probably who will never take meaningful snaps here. And again, just highlights the overall point of, I think what little bit of juice we had, I think is pretty well used up, at least at that position.
Yeah, I think so at this point, unless, Tommy comes out and just completely balls out this year and, Florida State somehow gets to 8 or 9 wins, and Mike can start to sell him on, listen, he struggled a lot at BC. Now he's here. He came here with 1 year with me and Tony, and things worked out really well. Just imagine what I could do with you. And even that's a tough sell, in my opinion, because there's not been a quarterback that Mike has recruited at Florida State that has produced. And, I get Jordan was here forever, and I think he helped to hide a lot of issues that, potentially we have with our quarterback coaching with our current staff. However, convincing a 5-star and elite guy to come here when you're going up against the big dogs who are always in the playoffs, the Alabamas, the Georgia, the Ohio State, even USC, who can sell that LA lifestyle and probably has unlimited NIL as well, it makes things extremely difficult, especially at that position.
So, I will say this isn't really part of the recruiting thing. I believe I heard, and I don't remember where, so I can't, it might have been headlines. I might have heard on headlines, that Castellanos could potentially petition for another year. I don't know how I feel about that, but I think the 5th game that he played 1 year was a bowl game, which now bowl games don't count against the red shirt. And so if things went really well, I don't think he has a insane NFL future ahead of him. You could potentially get him back for next year. Like if Florida State was able to surprise and go like 8-4, 9-3, getting him to run it back one more year, could be an option, right? You're probably going to need that option if you don't sign a quarterback that's, very good this year. And we'll see how Sperry develops. Some possible good news. We'll move on to this and then get out of here. Auburn commit, FSU legacy, Devin Carter, son of Dexter Carter, like one of the most gifable moments of all time when he put that flag on the Miami player's head. Was one time a Florida State commit, decommitted, and is now committed to Auburn. It seems like Florida State's at least making up some ground there, at least getting close. I wouldn't say that, we've got flip watch on or anything like that, and I'll say that, and he'll flip before we even put this out. But it does feel like Florida State's trending in a positive direction there. And one thing I will say, they've done a pretty good job of flipping guys over the last couple. Like they flipped 4, 5, 6, blue chips at the very late last year. When you think about Sperry, they went and got from Oklahoma. You think about Tylon Lee, they went out and got several flips. They got the Boggs kid to come over with Gus. Obviously, that one's expected. But they did a good job of flipping guys late in the cycle last year. And so they do, and especially coming off of a 2-10 season. I'm not trying to give them a ton of credit for anything recruiting wise, but that is something that kind of caught my eye, was how they were able to really go in heavy and get guys to flip over. It feels like if there was a big win this staff was going to pull off, you would hope that comes in earlier rather than later. Auburn's got a tough schedule. I think they open up with Baylor and then have the SEC grind, which I know we like to make fun of, but Auburn could legitimately fire their coach and go 4-8 this year. I guess the same could be said for Florida State, but I think their path is maybe a little bit tougher than FSU's considering what conference they're in. Is that one that, I'll ask you to put in a crystal ball. We'll steal from, 247 in their model, but what's your yeah, this is a fun one on June 7th, 8th, whatever, to talk about confidence level that Florida State not will, but can pull this flip off.
I'd say 5.5, maybe. I don't feel great about it. I feel like, being a legacy kid and his dad being a true legend at Florida State and had a lot of success in the NFL with the 49ers. And, I think we've spoke to his dad before in the early portion of this podcast. And I think that, if he already chose not to pick Florida State, I think there was a reason for that. I don't think 2-10 helped. I think the only caveat, which you already mentioned, if Auburn does end up firing their head coach, then I think you could probably be the most likely option. You look at other schools involved, North Carolina, Georgia, and Alabama, but does he have committable offers to Georgia and Alabama? I would venture to say no right now, but I think this could be, and I hate to be negative, this feels like it's been a really negative show, but it could be a scenario where you do get him to flip, and then Georgia or Alabama has a last minute opening and they come calling. I don't know how you say no to that. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I think he is. I'll push back. I think he probably does have, like, if he wanted in, I think they would find room for him. I think they would. I think they'd take him. I think he's that good. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's one that Florida State obviously needs to stay on. It's kind of crazy that, he decommitted, I think over a year ago. Like I do believe that, he was a 26 kid that decommitted like in 2024. Yeah. But, and then, with how last year went, I understand you not landing him. I think they've got a pretty good shot here. Will it happen? I don't know. 50 coin flip. Can it happen? I'd maybe be a little bit higher, maybe 70 or 80%, on can it actually happen? But will it happen? I'm probably like 50. But I think they've got a pretty good shot here. How seasons play out matter, right? Like, there's a chance that Auburn goes 8-4 instead of 4-8. They win some close ball games. Their new quarterback over from Oklahoma, plays well, and they're in a few more games than you would expect. And maybe some of their opponents are a little bit weaker. They win that out of conference game against Baylor. And then Florida State's, if Florida State, we've talked about the schedule, if they drop to Bama, which we kind of expect, and then lose on the road at Virginia and have Miami come in the next week, I mean, they're probably going to be 2-3, and season could pretty quickly go off the rails. Obviously, hoping that doesn't happen for, not just recruiting, but my mental health. But we'll see how both seasons play out. I think they've got a decent chance to pull that off. Will it happen? I don't know, man. I don't put a lot of eggs in having faith in anything with this staff with recruiting. So it's kind of a prove it to me and then I'll believe. So hopefully better updates. There are a lot of official visits going on right now in Tallahassee. I think it was like 19 or 21 or something like that. So there's a ton of kids on campus. They really are focused on that right now here in this June recruiting, official visit kind of season. A lot of kids make commitments in July. So we would expect, there to be good progress, good kind of turnover from that. I don't think Florida State's going to recruit, like a top 10 class, but they should be in that 15 to 20 range. And then we'll see how things go. So we'll keep you updated here on Double Fries No Slaw. Richie, thanks for hanging out. We'll do it again soon.
Sounds good.